I've gotten a response from, what was it, Godless Cranium. So I think I'm going to talk about this first because I'm sure that a lot of people are interested in what I have to say about that.
Sounds good. I know I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to do a proper response because I don't believe it's worthy of a response.
Really? And why not, Marty? I'm sure you have valid reasons. It couldn't possibly be because you have no real arguments against my position, but would rather pretend like they're beneath your notice instead, right? Not you, Marty.
It's okay. He did come up with some interesting points of rebuttal. He did. I'll admit that I got his question wrong, and I apologize for that.
Okay, we're off to a good start. So, what you're planning on doing is correcting your mistake, and now you're going to actually address the question I originally asked in a separate video, right? I mean, that's what someone who is interested in an honest dialogue would do, especially if that someone is admitting that they've completely missed the mark and not answered the original, and may I point out simple question that I asked. Not only did you not answer my question, but I then took the time to go through the arguments you had made and refuted those as well. So let's just do a quick recap before we hear more of what you have to say, Marty. 1. I asked a straightforward question. 2. You voluntarily made a video response to that question. 3. Your response had nothing to do with my original question. 4. Out of courtesy, I answered the points you made in that video anyway. And so here we find ourselves. So please, explain why you think my video wasn't worth responding to, even though just moments before you admitted that you screwed up and I made good points. Let's hear it.
Answers were equally, if not more, lazy than what I put in.
Sounds to me like you just admitted to making lazy content. I have to admit that I agree with you on that point. You couldn't even take the time to include clips from my video. And because you couldn't be bothered doing that much, you completely failed to answer the question and instead spent 20 minutes rambling on trying to answer a question I never asked. Second, fuck you, Marty. Unlike you, I spend a lot of time making videos, including yours. Unlike you, I do include clips for context, I do take the time to listen to the entire video, and I take the time to read about any positions you may hold that I'm not familiar with. The video response I made you took me about 8 hours. 8 hours of listening, researching, script writing, talking to Inane Dragon, editing, creating a thumbnail, and so forth. While you may not agree with my content, I'm definitely not lazy about making videos. I put in work, Marty, and if you put in even a fraction of the work I do, you might have been able to answer the question I actually asked you, instead of embarrassing yourself. Next.
For instance, when I talk about the materialist metaphysic, Mr. Godless Cranium, obviously very brainy, responds, I'm not a materialist because I rejected a job once. I rejected a job even though it gave me more money. Obviously, completely missing the fucking point of the video.
This is where I lost all respect for you as a YouTuber, Marty. You do realize that your argument, your video, is public and available to anyone willing to look, right? Let's hear what you actually said when I talked about turning down jobs. Did I do that in response to you talking about material metaphysics? Let's see, shall we?
So you can't really run a society on hedonism because hedonism is merely seeking sensual pleasure and material pleasure, and it's probably very similar with Randian objectivism since it doesn't really concede a immaterial either. So it's basically just pursuing material happiness and pursuing sensual pleasure.
There's more than just material pleasure. In fact, I actively try not to be materialistic because I find that material things tie you down. You can be controlled by your things if they're used against you. I can't think of anything I own that I couldn't say goodbye to tomorrow. Now, I'm not saying I'd be jumping for joy if I lost my PS4 or my car or what have you, but I have lost those things before. I've had people try to control my actions or demand my affection by using my stuff against me. I just won't have it. My freedom of thought and freedom to choose my own path through life are two of the most important concepts in my world. I've also turned down higher paying jobs. Why are you lying, Marty? It's almost as if I was responding to your assertions about hedonism and seeking material pleasures rather than material metaphysics, which you just claimed I did. Maybe if you started including clips, you'd stop creating videos where you misunderstand and misrepresent the views of your opponent. Stop being so bloody lazy, and better yet, stop either misrepresenting or downright lying about your opponent's positions. On the other hand, your video annoys the hell out of me, but on the other, I'm embarrassed for you. Get your head out of your ass, Marty.
Obviously missing that I said materialist metaphysic, which means that the essence of everything is something that is quantifiable within the material world.
Which I've just shown you isn't what you were talking about, and yet you continue to talk out of your ass.
Everything that exists, is that. Completely missing that point. And at that point, I'm going to be honest, I watched about 5 minutes of it and just closed it because I thought, if you're going to put that little effort into making a response to me, then why should I put the effort in of responding to this formally?
So let me get this straight. You're now responding to a video you didn't even watch till the end. In fact, you watched only about a quarter of it, since the video in question was just over 21 minutes long. Jesus, Marty. It just gets more embarrassing by the moment.
I thought it was fucking stupid. And the rest of it, I can basically infer from comments that I've gotten off fucking idiots. So a lot of them are fucking idiots.
Just when I think it couldn't get any worse, you take it to the next level, Marty. Now you're not even going to address the actual arguments Inane and I made, but instead you're going to address what you inferred from comments people left on your video? That makes a lot of sense. Jesus. My face is getting sore from face palming so many times. I've covered some stupid shit on my channel, but you're approaching escape velocity on the bullshit meter. Your dishonesty and unwillingness to listen to an opposing argument and address it honestly is staggering to behold.
For instance, I got a lot of responses like, oh, I was in the army once. One guy said, I was in the army once. How come you reckon that I can't sacrifice my life for my country even though I'm an atheist? And the thing is that I never said that. I talked about what naturally derived from materialist atheism. Obviously, somebody can believe in natural law and be an atheist, but the trouble is that doesn't naturally derive.
Yes, it naturally derives from some atheist's perspective, which is what those people were addressing. They were trying to tell you that despite your assertions, atheists can and will sacrifice themselves, including their lives, under certain circumstances, and every atheist soldier is proof of that. You can be a materialist atheist and do all of those things, Marty. That's what they're telling you. And if you removed your head from your ass for just a moment and listened, then listened to what you said in your video, you can easily see their point and understand why they're telling you that.
I think, because the thing is, if you really truly embrace something like that, it will move through your beliefs and change them fundamentally, which is what I don't think they get.
If you don't think they get it, then explain it. You don't want to explain anything, Marty. What you want to do is toss word salads, name books, throw out philosophies and obscure bullshit so that you can appear like you know what you're talking about. You want to seem like you're an authority on this matter, but even though I was told you were the high-hanging fruit in the theist community, you're nothing more than an obscuratist and a lazy, dishonest hack who can't even take the time to listen and understand what your opposition is saying before you start spewing nonsense. Do better, Marty.
A lot of these atheist classical liberals are really kind of silly as well, because they believe in classical liberalism, even though classical liberalism doesn't allow them to have rights, according to John Locke. It's silly things like this that are a little bit,
God damn. You don't have to be a classical liberal to be an atheist. You don't even have to be a liberal. But not only that, but a quick Google search reveals that you're full of shit when it comes to John Locke as well, as I'll show you in a moment. But even if John Locke did believe what you say he believed, that doesn't mean he was right, or that people can't disagree with him. Anyway, from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, perhaps the most central concept in Locke's political philosophy is his theory of natural law and natural rights. The natural law concept existed long before Locke as a way of expressing the idea that there were certain moral truths that applied to all people, regardless of the particular place where they lived or the agreements they had made. The most important early contrast was between laws that were by nature, and thus generally applicable, and those that were conventional and operated only in those places where the particular convention had been established. This distinction is sometimes formulated as a difference between natural law and positive law. Natural law is also distinct from divine law, in that the latter, in the Christian tradition, normally referred to those laws that God had directly revealed through prophets and other inspired writers. Natural law can be discovered by reason alone, and applies to all people, while divine law can be discovered only through God's special revelation, and applies only to those to whom it is revealed, and who God specifically indicates are to be bound. And since he's commonly known as the father of liberalism, after what I just read you, do you honestly think he would say that liberalism doesn't allow them to have rights? Of course not. Again, you're talking out of your ass and throwing out names in the hope that nobody questions you, or bothers to look into what you're saying. You're nothing more than a charlatan who doesn't understand the concepts you're referring to.
And then I got a couple of comments which I assume relate to what Inane Dragon said. Because Inane Dragon apparently did some sort of response to my mathematical part.
Damn it, Cranium. I was told this guy was high-hanging fruit, and yet he didn't get your question right. He couldn't be asked to watch the response before criticizing it, and he blatantly didn't even understand what little he did watch, equivocating materialist metaphysics with hedonism, his own claim. What a fucking moron. Moreover, high-hanging fruit doesn't lie and misrepresent people's positions. I'll get to that in a minute.
Now, frankly, I'm not going to sit up and say the man's an idiot, because I don't think he is, but he's very wrong about a lot of things. As opposed to Cranium, who I am convinced is an idiot.
I'm going to step aside here. I'm not the one getting called an idiot. Godless, take it away.
Huh. Well, if I'm an idiot, you failed to demonstrate how or why. Instead, you shit the bed at every opportunity. You even led off by saying you misrepresented my question and that I had made good points. But now I'm an idiot because reasons. He's all yours, Inane. I'm done with Marty.
Yeah. Inane Dragon is the kind of guy who believes in the scientific method, even in spite of his, well, philosophical naturalism.
I don't believe in the scientific method. I accept it as a useful tool in exploring and understanding reality. There is a massive difference in the two. I do not, for example, begin to suggest that the method is infallible. It is a tool. It is only as accurate as those using it. The same goes for philosophy and mathematics. And as we saw from your original failure to answer Godless Cranium's question, you're absolutely abominable at all of this.
If what's his face? If Classical Theist is watching, if not, hello. Me and him talked to him on Twitter, and we had a debate about, well, the scientific method and its ability to exist without immaterial constraints that are actually true. We managed to narrow him down to the basic philosophical precept which allows the scientific method to function. In other words, the principle of sufficient reason as quantified by Gottfried Leibniz, which basically states that all contingent objects have an event that causes them, or something along those lines. So you can see this assumption throughout science by how you're trying to find out the cause ultimately from the testing.
Well, you got one thing right. You and Classical T did have a debate with me. Unfortunately for your claim, you did not narrow me down to shit. You didn't demonstrate that the principle of sufficient reason allows the scientific method to function, and your definition of the principle as used by Leibniz is factually wrong. You should not talk out of your ass, but that's all that you seem to do. Leibniz's version of the principle of sufficient reason is that for any fact or event there exists an explanation, not a cause, as you suggest. Now, this is a gross oversimplification, and there are far more issues to discuss in Leibniz's particular formulation of this principle, but the important part is that, Marty, you are just wrong, because Leibniz is in no way saying that all contingent objects have an event that caused them. He is saying, as I pointed out previously, that all events and facts, contingent or necessary, have explanations for them. You don't understand the basics of what you're talking about, and like your bit about the laws of logic being objectively true because of Gödel's incompleteness theorem, I was able to demonstrate it after mere minutes of research. That's how fucking low your fruit hangs.
And such like that. It's been a while since I've done a scientific test, but I know enough to know that the whole point of testing a hypothesis is to see the effect of one thing on another, which naturally fulfills the principle of sufficient reason.
Nope. You're just wrong. The whole point of a test is not to see the effect of one thing on another, but to see whether the prediction of the hypothesis is supported by the outcome of the test. Often, but not always, this means examining cause and effect. It's the not always part that you seem to be missing, reliably, every fucking time you open your ignorant mouth.
Now, of course, the materialist metaphysic rejects the principle of sufficient reason because that in itself is an immaterial truth, you see. So, when we present him with this, what he says is that apparently this works because sometimes the scientific method fails.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is called lying out of your fucking ass! Here's where I lose anything resembling respect for you, Marty, because I've explained repeatedly how you're misrepresenting what I said. In fact, You are inventing from whole cloth things which I have never said. Try not being a lying pile of shit in the future. What might fail, but has not been shown to necessarily fail, is the principle of sufficient reason. The scientific method, as I've previously explained, is only a tool. A screwdriver is the wrong method for breaking concrete. Does that mean the screwdriver fails when you slam it into concrete? Didn't think so, so stop lying. What I said that upset Marty and classical theists so motherfucking much is that the principle of sufficient reason may have limits. And funny thing that, since they're the ones who demand that it must necessarily have limits. Here's what I mean. These two chuckleheads are theists precisely because they want to terminate an infinite regress of causes created by their own interpretation of the principle of sufficient reason with an uncaused, unexplained God. That is to say, God doesn't require a sufficient reason for his existence because he just is. You fucking moron, Marty! That's a limit on the principle of sufficient reason, precisely as I said the principle of sufficient reason may have in our previous argument, you lying son of a bitch! Of course, the irony here is that there are almost no philosophers who don't accept limits on the principle of sufficient reason, which was my original point in the Twitter thread. See the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy for an elementary level point that Marty can't even grasp.
Which, as you can see, is rather silly because the entire scientific method, with all of its proofs, every single thing that you can prove with the scientific method, and yeah, of course, it proves stuff, is ultimately contingent on the principle of sufficient reason actually being existential. You see the problem here?
No problem here. The scientific method is a fallible human attempt to understand the world. The principle of sufficient reason is a fallible human description of behavior within the world. It all makes sense unless you want absolute certainty. Since I'm not a fucking child, I get the fact that I won't know anything for certain. There's a reason that outside of religious circles, the principle of sufficient reason is either rejected or limited by various conditional statements, all of which you would have known with 10 seconds of fucking research. Grow up, Marty. You aren't a child. You can deal with uncertainty. If you can't, sod off and join the low-hanging young earthers who sound intelligent next to your bullshit.
Enough said.
So anyway, I'm going to go on to something a bit more nice, something that's a bit more, a little less irritating for me to deal with, because frankly, I wanted to get that out of the way first, because the guy irritated me quite a lot. So